Do you have problems with inserts pulling out of your arrows when you're removing an arrow from a target or really at any time? Do you have that problem? Well, you're not alone. A lot of people have that problem, and there's a lot of factors that go into making sure that that never happens. But it is 100% possible to build an arrow that the insert will never come out. You just have to know a few tricks. That's what we're talking about today. The very first thing that most people don't do before they glue their inserts is clean the inside of their arrow shaft. That's super crucial. I'm gonna do it right here. So this is a full-length shaft. It's not cut. So it's gonna have less dust than a cut arrow because when you cut it, a lot of dust goes inside the arrow shaft. But any arrow that comes out of a factory is going to have carbon dust in it, and that seriously blocks adhesion. So what I do is I take Q-tip and a bottle of rubbing alcohol, and I dip one end in the rubbing alcohol, and a Q-tip fits perfectly in any arrow diameter, even a micro. And I'm gonna go in and twist and scrub, literally just scrub out the inside of that arrow. This one's pretty clean because it's not cut, but there is still some dust. I'll come up and show it to the camera. Then what I do is I take the other end dry and I go back in there and kind of dry it out and scrub it again. And usually you'll still get some dust. Here's what that Q-tip looks like. This was the end that went in first with the rubbing alcohol, and this was the end that came out after. So obviously more carbon dust on the wet side than the second side, but there still is some dust in there. So then I'll go in with a third dry one and do it again, and it'll come out clean that time. It should. Then what I'll do is I'll take, the end that was dry but still kind of dirty from the last one, dip it in rubbing alcohol, and that'll go be the first cleaner on the next one. I just do that to save Q-tips, but that's not really the point here. The point is that I want to run a Q-tip through my arrow shaft a few times and really scrub out that inside. First time with rubbing alcohol to clean out that carbon dust. That's the number one reason that your inserts are pulling out. If you aren't doing that, you're skipping a big step. The second thing, of course, is glue. If you're using a glue that just doesn't hold up to impact, you have a problem. There's a lot of glues that are really, really strong out there, like, a fletching glue, which is just a super glue. I use Gorilla Glue for fletching. It is very, very strong, but it's not impact resistant the way you need your insert glue to be. Easton epoxy is really good, the one that comes with HIT inserts. That stuff's really good. I've never had one of those pull out. The only thing is you gotta make sure when you mix the epoxy, actually any epoxy, you mix it and you gotta just let it sit out for a little while until it becomes tacky and not so runny. Because if you insert an insert when that epoxy is super runny, your inserts can slip around. That happens all the time with HIT inserts. I'll actually mix the epoxy and then go do other stuff for like 45 minutes and then come back after that epoxy's had some time to set, and then it's much stiffer going into the arrow shaft and it's gonna hold. It's not gonna slip around at all. That's a really key tip there too. But other than the Easton epoxy, which I've had really good luck with, I found that these black, really high-end glues work really good. I have no idea what it is about the black color that makes some of these glues so good, but not all of them work amazing. I got this one. This is a black medium thick, which is like a super, super strong adhesive. And this black stuff tends to be very, very quick drying. So you don't have a lot of working time. You got to work with it really quick. So I have two here. This is one that I bought. Because I couldn't find this black glue that I once had that I knew worked so good for inserts. So I bought this stuff thinking maybe it's just black glue. And then I bought this one. This is another black insert weld, and I tested them both. So what I'll do before I ever use a new glue is I'll take an old scrap arrow shaft, cut it in half, put an insert in it on each end, and then I'll stick a big broadhead on it and stick it into a piece of plywood or something and try my absolute hardest to get it out. If you can't get it out after a 24-hour set time, you're gonna be fine. But a lot of the times they will just pull out. One of these did pull out. So despite them both being black glues, the insert weld was perfect, and I've built a ton of arrows with this already, but this one did not work. So don't just look at what it says on the label about how strong it is, or go with something that looks like what you've worked with in the past. You've got to test your insert glue out the way I described. Take a scrap shaft, put an old scrap insert in there, big broadhead, shoot it into a piece of plywood, and try your absolute hardest to get it out. If it's gonna come out, it'll come out. You know, like I'll put it in and I'll go like pull it out like this, right? Just beat the crap out of it trying to get it out, because the last thing you want is to start having your inserts pull out in targets. It's a disaster. It sucks, especially if you're building arrows for other people. In my experience, if you use a glue that is just bulletproof like this stuff or the Easton epoxy, and you clean the inside of your shaft, you're not going to have issues with this. You're simply not going to have inserts pulling out. If you're still concerned, one thing you can do is take a really small Allen key, and on the inside of each arrow shaft, you can I'll just put it in to the shaft at an angle here, and I'll spin the arrow shaft around that Allen key and effectively scratch up the inside of it a little bit. If you do that, you're going to want to clean it again because you're creating more carbon dust, but that's a way of scoring the inside of the arrow shaft to make sure that that epoxy or the glue has something more to grab onto. I've had this work extremely well, but like I said, when I do all the other steps, I don't find this to be necessary, but there's absolutely no reason you can't do this. If you're just so frustrated with having this issue in the past, this will help a lot. The last reason that you might be having inserts pull out is you're not letting your arrows set long enough after you glue the inserts. So most set time recommendations that you'll find say 24 hours, and that to me is a bare minimum. I usually will glue my inserts and I don't touch them for 2, 3, even 4 days. I just don't see a need to. I mean, I do get anxious to go out shooting and stuff, but I want to make sure they're fully cured and that there's just nothing that can go wrong once they're built. I know how anxious you can get waiting for arrows. It's so exciting to have a new dozen arrows to go shoot, but you know, if you're watching hockey and building your arrows at night and you let them sit overnight and think, great, I'll shoot in the morning, they sat all night. No, that's not enough. That's only half of the minimum recommended time. If you ever use a 2-part epoxy that says, 30-minute set time, 24, 48, 72 hours minimum. I don't care what the set time says. On that same note, if you are buying 2-part epoxy, try to find 2-part epoxy that has the longest set time possible. You don't want to use the 5-minute epoxy or 10-minute epoxy. Even 30-minute makes me nervous, but now obviously they're trying to make epoxies lower and lower set times. It's marketing, right? But if they made one that was, a 7-day set time, I would be buying, an entire case of that stuff, because the longer the set time, generally the stronger the epoxy is and the more impact resistant I found it to be. Those are my tips. If you follow all these steps and find the right glue, you're not going to have issues. Finding the right glue, though, can be a big factor. I will say that this one works amazing. It's called Insert Weld. It's a black glue. It's got a picture of a dude with a welding mask on. This stuff is really awesome if you can get your hands on some of that. When I find a good product like this, I buy, I've got 6 or 7 bottles of this stuff because I know it's bulletproof and I don't want to have to go looking for it when I run out. Thank you guys for watching as always. And of course, if you have any questions, write them into the letoffpodcast@gmail.com. I'll answer them on the Let Off Podcast.